This is the new MacBook Air with the M4 chip. It's the biggest upgrade since the introduction of Apple Silicon and the M1. In this video, we're going to find out what the latest from Apple can really offer. I'm going to give you my thoughts as a lifelong Windows user and someone who started using Linux about 5 years ago. My current daily driver is the Lenovo Yoga 9i. So now the big question is, can this new MacBook Air get me to jump ship? Stay tuned and we'll find out. So my first impressions with the laptop were fairly nice hardware-wise, but when I started setting up the software, I did have this little glitch in the beginning where I kept going back to the hello screen. Now there was a recent video by F-Stoppers where he showed the MacBook Air started up right away on first boot, and the Microsoft Surface took him about 30 minutes to get set up. But in that video, he updated the Surface, but he did not update the MacBook Air. So it's a little bit misleading. In my experience with this MacBook, it also needed an update. It took me about half an hour before I finally got to the desktop. One thing I like is there is disk encryption when you're setting up the laptop for the first time. I really think Windows needs to do that. It's a great security features for laptops that are going to be used for business use. Once I got into the operating system, my first thoughts is that there's way too many applications. There's over 20 pre-installed apps that are already on the dock. This is just a complete mess in my opinion. There's tons of what I would consider bloatware. Half the stuff on the Mac dock I'm never going to use. So when Apple users say that MacBooks are clean with no bloatware and Windows has loads of it, it could not be further than the truth. You got Apple TV, Apple News, which has a bunch of clickbait and a bunch of junk on it, just like the Windows widgets on the bottom left. I call that the Windows garbage wall. In Windows, you can disable that, and of course on Mac, you can remove Apple News, but you can't completely uninstall it. Hardware-wise, the design is sleek, it's beautiful, the sharp edges feel really nice to the touch. My Yoga has rounded edges, which are a little bit more comfortable, but the sharp edges are nice too. There's a little divot at the bottom to fit your finger in when you want to open the laptop. It's such a nice, simple design choice. It gives it a very high quality feel. The laptop is so light, it's kind of crazy. The fanless design is also super cool and kind of unbelievable that they can do that. I love the magnet charger, easily the best in the industry, and only the Microsoft Surface laptop can match it. Although the Surface's magnet charger is a little bit sleeker, it can go towards the front or the back. It can also charge through USB as well if you don't like the magnet charger or you don't have it on hand. I use my Lenovo Yoga charger in the MacBook and it charges no problem. Now this one I have is the sky blue. At first it looks like silver, but when you put it beside a silver item, you realize how blue it really is. And it's subtle, but it just makes the laptop look so nice. And I like how the fingerprint reader is also the lock button. That dual function is such a clean and minimal design, and I haven't seen any other laptop do it. Now the notch on the screen is pretty bad. It seems unfinished. If Steve Jobs was still around, he would be super unhappy with that and he wouldn't want to release a laptop at all. My Yoga 9i has a much better webcam and Windows Hello face unlocking, and yet it has thinner bezels around the screen. The 60 Hz screen is nice, but if you've used a 120 Hz screen, it's certainly noticeable. There's nothing wrong with it, but it just doesn't have that smooth scrolling that you get from something with a high refresh rate screen like I have on my Yoga 9. The trackpad is easily one of the best in the industry. It's large, it's haptic feedback. You don't have to rely on a mechanical click, so you can click anywhere, and there's 2 levels of clicking, so depending on the app, you'll have some extra features with that as well. But the keyboard is a little bit disappointing. It definitely feels on the cheaper side. The travel in the keys is very low, and when you're using it, it doesn't give you that sense of quality like what I have on my Yoga 9. Another thing is that the keyboard backlighting doesn't have an auto setting. It doesn't detect the lighting in the room to turn on and off automatically like what I have on my Yoga 9. There's also no way to adjust it with keyboard shortcuts. You have to adjust it in the actual settings window. And here's the camera and microphone test. This is the camera and microphone test on the 2025 M4 MacBook Air. From what I'm seeing, the colors look pretty nice. It's got that warm tone, which I do like. And I do think the video quality is pretty good considering it's only a 1080p webcam. And this is the Lenovo Yoga 9i. This is a 1440p camera, so it might be a little bit clear, but the colors look a little bit colder. And sound quality, I'm not sure. I have to check it out when I'm editing the video, but I think this one's a pretty good camera too, although I personally like the look of the Mac when it comes to the camera quality. And so how does the MacBook sound compared to my Yoga 9? Okay, now for the speaker test, I'm gonna play the same song and switch between the two. So while the Mac has pretty good sound, the Yoga is just louder. It's got way better treble and way more bass. That soundbar that's built into the hinge makes a tremendous difference. So I have both laptops set to 100% screen brightness. Now the Mac looks pretty good. It's not bad considering it's not an OLED screen, but as soon as you look at the Yoga 9 with the OLED screen, the sky is more blue. You get so much brighter greens on the grassy area there compared to the Mac, which looks a little bit faded and dull. Now diving into the actual operating system. Search is so snappy and smooth. I love that spotlight search, and you can hit Command Space to activate it, and I find that's the best way to launch applications. Installing applications is way faster than how it is on Windows. With Mac, you basically download this DMG file, which is like a disk image. You double click it and it gives you an option with a little icon to click and drag the file into the applications. The application's installed. That's it. It's very similar to how Linux operates. Steve Jobs actually famously said that Mac OS X, when it was being released, is very Linux-like in their marketing.
And it's very Linux-like, very much so.
With Windows, you download executable files, you double click them and there's a menu, there's an installation wizard, you're gonna go next, 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 there's a bunch of options. With Mac, it's not like that. The preview screen is essential. When you're looking at pictures or videos or any sort of files, you can tap your spacebar and a preview screen shows up. You move your arrows around and you can preview any videos, files, PDFs. This is essential for creators because you don't have to double tap the file and open a bunch of different programs. You can just preview stuff quickly, find the file you need, and click and drag it into your project. I use this on Linux as well. On Windows, there's a tool you can use called Quick Look. It's free in the Microsoft Store to give you the same functionality. Siri was nice to have for asking it some questions about macOS itself. While it's certainly not as powerful as Windows Copilot or Google Gemini, it's nice that there is a built-in assistant for new users, but it doesn't have any sort of a conversation mode. Sometimes I'll ask it a question if I have ideas and it'll just dump me to a Google search. So it's pretty unfinished. It doesn't feel like a real AI assistant like what you get from Copilot on Windows. Web browsing was smooth, it was snappy, it was some of the fastest web browsing I've ever felt. One downside is that there's no cut option in Finder. So if you're trying to cut a file and move it around the file system, there is no cut option. Also, a lot of shortcuts at the sidebar to your home folders like downloads and pictures and videos are missing. You have to actually enable them in the Finder settings. So I recommend you do that. A huge problem with macOS is window management is just terrible. I'll show you what I mean by that. Double tap the top here. You can see it doesn't actually maximize. It just does this weird like half sizing thing. If I click the green button, it now maximizes into a new workspace. So I can then use my gestures to go back into the original workspace, which is fine, but not every program does that. Here we are in Steam. If I press maximize on Steam, this actually stays in the same workspace. It does not create a workspace. So there's an inconsistency with the different apps and how they maximize. If I swipe 3 fingers up, I can see what I have on this desktop, right? Now, I have Resolve open, I have Firefox, all those. Okay, what if I hit Command Tab? Let's say if I open up Steam, but nothing. It says I'm on Steam, but the Steam window is still minimized. I have to actually go down here and click it to bring it back. What's the point of this multitask view if it's not actually going to bring me into that app? Tiling is by far the worst. So the Mac is on the left. Look, if I hover over the maximize key, it gives me the option to split everything up, right? One click, boom, it does it. But if these programs are minimized and I bring this back and I try to do it when they're minimized, it doesn't work. It just tiles this program on the left. It doesn't give me an option to fill in this space here. If we go to Windows on the right side, look, I'll even minimize these programs. If I hover over the maximize key and I go to the split view, look, it'll give me the option of what I have running. I can pick between these two programs, select that one, and there you go. Everything is tiled correctly. But it gets even worse. So look, on the Mac, if I try and resize these programs, look, they all resize independently. The other programs don't actually adjust with my resizing. But on Windows, if I try and resize them, look, they all resize together. Automatically adjust the other windows in the tiling mode. Mac OS is so broken when it comes to multitasking and tiling windows. Apple really needs to improve the window management on Mac OS, but overall the OS is really good. It's really stable. It's using the Unix file system. So in the back end, it's very stable and very secure. But the desktop environment and user experience in Windows is just a lot simpler and more familiar to most people. Like pretty much anyone can hop onto a Windows computer and they'll know how to navigate around. With Mac OS, there's a little bit more of a learning curve. Okay, let's get into performance. So starting with Geekbench 6, you can see I've got the Yoga 9i, the MacBook Air with the M4 chip, and the Surface laptop with the Snapdragon X Plus chip. The MacBook basically wipes the floor with everything. It's got a way faster single core score. It beats them both in multi-core performance, and it destroys the Snapdragon when it comes to graphics graphical performance, although the Yoga 9 is not too far behind. They more or less have the same graphical performance. But the MacBook Air is just super impressive here. Also in web browsing, I use speedometer 3.0, and you can see that the MacBook Air does 48.5 in web browsing, and the Surface Laptop is at 31, and the Yoga 9 is just trailing behind at 21. So the snappiness in the web browser that I felt can actually be seen here on a benchmark. The web browsing experience is super snappy on the MacBook Air, and it's most likely because of that single core performance. However, if we look at disk speed, you can see that the Yoga 9 has significantly faster SSD speed than all the other laptops. It's more than double the speed of the MacBook Air when it comes to the SSD. That could translate to opening programs faster, opening files faster, but the MacBook has the faster processor, so it's probably a wash. However, technically speaking, the Yoga 9 has double the SSD performance of the MacBook and even that of the Surface Laptop. I'm not sure what Apple's doing there, but the internal SSDs on these MacBooks are quite slow, and not to mention the SSD is not even replaceable. So the Yoga 9 not only has the fastest SSD, it's also replaceable and upgradable down the line. And now as far as battery tests goes, I had a YouTube video playing and I had all of them in their lowest power modes. And as you can see, the Yoga 9 got absolutely dusted by everything else at only 7 hours and 56 minutes to have 9% of its battery remaining. The Yoga 7i actually went to 13 hours and 52 minutes, which is really good for an Intel chip. And then the Surface Laptop, 15 hours, 17 minutes with that new Qualcomm Snapdragon processor, which is now an ARM design chip, but nothing even came close to the MacBook Air as far as battery life goes at a whopping 18 hours and 42 minutes of continuous video playback and still having 9% of its battery left. I actually let it ride out all the way to 0 to see how long it could go, and I got over 20 hours of battery life playing a video. Now, obviously, if you're doing video editing, if you're working on a laptop, you're gonna use more battery life. Like I edited a video on it, and just in a few minutes, I drained 10% of battery life by doing a simple video edit. But the fact that it can go this long in a test that's giving a fair chance to all the laptops just shows you that when it comes to battery life and efficiency, nothing comes close to Apple. Now, as far as temperatures goes, during some of the benchmarks, the MacBook Air got quite hot. And if you did the tests repeatedly, the scores would start to drop. But that's a very extreme case. And under normal use, it's very cool and obviously completely silent. But if you plan on doing any sort of professional work, 3D applications or gaming, definitely expect some heat soak with the MacBook Air. It's mostly at the bottom towards the back of the laptop, but after a while, I did start to feel the palm rest getting very hot too. Because of that fanless design, there's nowhere for heat to escape. It just starts to build up within the chassis. For professional work, you definitely want to go for a MacBook Pro. When it comes to gaming, the MacBook Air just completely falls apart. The only game that I could install in Steam was Counter-Strike 2. All the other games in my Steam library couldn't install at all. There is a game porting toolkit that allows Windows games to play on macOS, similar to Proton on Linux that allows Windows games to run under Linux. But at this point, the support on Linux is so much better for gaming, and it's definitely the second place option behind Windows if you're a gamer. The best way to game on a MacBook Air would be your streaming options like GeForce Now, or stream them from a Windows gaming PC that you already have. You could use Crossover and Parallels as well if you don't mind buying extra software to get that to work and actually installing Windows on the MacBook Air. Of course, there's a lot of games in the actual Mac App Store, and it seems like that's the direction that Apple's going in when it comes to any sort of gaming. As far as third-party launchers goes, like Steam and the others, just forget it. Video editing was pretty good on the MacBook Air, and the export time was pretty quick as well. Now, I do all my video editing on my desktop PC with an RTX 2080 Ti graphics card that came out all the way back in 2018. It still gives me much faster export times than the MacBook Air, but it's impressive that the Air is not that far behind. Like, we're comparing a thin and light Ultrabook to a full desktop PC with a massive graphics card. So here are the pros of the MacBook Air. The build quality is amazing as you would expect. The performance is super impressive. The battery life is insanely good. It gives you full confidence to use a laptop all day long without the need to bring your charger. I like the Unix file system of macOS and the stability and how programs install so quickly. It really is very Linux-like, just like Steve Jobs said. The preview window is a tiny feature, but so handy for creators. The magnet charger is so good. I don't know how every laptop doesn't use that. I like the fingerprint reader doubling as the lock button as well. The trackpad and gestures are amazing, but Windows is also really good now when it comes to gesture support. And while this is certainly not a professional device, the fact that you can edit videos and do some pro level work work is super impressive for a thin and light fanless laptop. But as always, it's not perfect, so here's what I didn't like about the M4 MacBook Air. The notch at the top screen should just not be there at all. They should really fix that, especially because there's no Face ID, so I don't know why all that space needs to be taken on the screen. The keyboard is decent, but it definitely feels cheap and not as nice as what I have on my Yoga 9i. The screen is only 60 Hz, and at this price point, there are many laptops that have 120 Hz OLED screens. I did have many gripes with macOS, but a lot of them just came down to my own preference and what I'm used to. But the worst part of macOS is definitely the window management and multitasking and trying to resize programs. It's just janky and broken and seems very unfinished. If you want to take gaming seriously, just stay away from Mac, as I'm sure you already know. But most importantly, Macs just don't have the widespread support that Windows does. On Windows, pretty much any software, hardware, accessories, games, you just double click, install it, and it's gonna work. If you try and use a Bluetooth mouse with a Mac that's not necessarily supported on Mac OS, the scroll is going to be reversed. So you can go into settings and change that, but then the scrolling on your trackpad is going to be reversed. So then you'll need a third-party application to modify the mouse's settings and not macOS's settings. And even then, your back button and forward button on the mouse don't work. Every other operating system, Windows, Chrome OS, Android, Linux, you plug in or pair any mouse, it's going to work perfectly right away. With Mac OS, that's a very big pain point, trying to use third-party accessories. Apple wants you to buy Apple's own Magic Mouse. They don't want you to use any third-party accessories, and I don't like that, because as a consumer, I want to have choice, I want to have flexibility. Some people like that closed walled garden ecosystem of Apple, but I don't like to be locked into that. That's why I stopped using an iPhone many years ago, because of that closed walled garden. Some folks like that, I'm the opposite. And the market obviously prefers to be in an open ecosystem because Windows is 72% market share and Apple's only 15%. There's a lot of stuff about macOS that's simply better than Windows, like stability in the Unix file system. But at the end of the day, Bill Gates, Paul Allen, Steve Ballmer were at the right place at the right time. They licensed DOS to IBM. That set the stage for the PC operating system. Governments, schools, businesses all used DOS, and then Windows came out. And so that's why there's so much more support for hardware, software, applications, games on Windows. Now, I'm definitely not a Windows fanboy. If anything, I'm a Linux fanboy. I like Linux more than anything else because it kind of combines the best of both worlds. But Linux has the same problem that macOS has, and even to a further extent. There's even less software, applications, games, hardware support on Linux than there is on Mac. So am I going to switch my Yoga 9i for a MacBook? The simple answer is no. I mainly use my Yoga 9i to write scripts, and it has a much better keyboard, a way better screen, way better speakers. I like the touchscreen with the 360 hinge, and I like the face unlocking feature, which makes it very seamless. Sure, the battery life is a complete joke compared to the MacBook Air, but for my use case, the battery life is more than enough. And if you want a Windows laptop with much better battery life, get the Surface laptop. I like the Linux-like feeling of macOS, plus the fact that you get much better support of software and hardware than what you get on a Linux OS. The MacBook Air is an amazing device. It works very well and offers a much more affordable entry into the Apple ecosystem without cutting too many corners. The performance and battery life is world-class. If you need a new MacBook right now, then it's a no-brainer. And if you're a Windows user who's looking to switch to Mac, then there's never been a better time than right now. The overall package is so hard to beat, and only the Microsoft Surface laptop can trade blows with the MacBook when it comes to battery life and build quality. If you want to pick up the new MacBook Air, definitely check out my link in the video description or the top pinned comment. It really helps support the channel. And also check out my full review on the Microsoft Surface Laptop 7, which I truly think is Microsoft's MacBook. Like the video if you found it helpful. Leave me a comment if I missed anything and I'll cover it in a short video. My name is Baz and you're watching Pro Shopper. On this channel, we focus on making tech buying easy. If that sounds good to you, then I hope you consider subscribing. Thanks and see you in the next one.